Hi, my name's Craig Wilson, and welcome to the Making the Media podcast, an in-depth look at the challenges and opportunities facing the news and media entertainment industries. This time around, we're looking at local news in the United States, and to do that, my guest is Bob Ellis, who is the VP and General Manager of the station WDIV in Detroit, Michigan. A passionate believer in local news and recognised as a leader in his field, this is his second stint in Detroit, having also worked in Florida. Now, if you've been following the podcast since we started in 2021, you may remember Bob, as he featured in one of our first episodes, looking at how his stations in Jacksonville were adapting in what was still a COVID-dominated world. So how have things changed in local news since we last spoke? He returned to Detroit 3 years ago, so I began by asking him about the focus of the station.
When I came here 3 years ago, what I really felt was a differentiator, both for the station and our industry, is to really try to be as community focused as possible, to be as grassroots centric as we could possibly be. And so really what we've worked on since my return here, and this is my second stint, by the way, at this station. I was here for 15 years. I left for 13 to run our Jacksonville property, and now I'm back for 3. In fact, in just a couple weeks, I will finish my 30th year with Graham Media Group. So it's a milestone that I'm proud of. And so, we've really worked to try to be very community focused. And so some of the ways we've done that, right, is the station has had a long history in the city of Detroit. And one of the things that the station was known for going back 40 years was this super iconic musical branding campaign that kind of defined the station. Go for it. It was lyrics and words that kind of instilled a sense of pride in being from Detroit and a sense of can-do attitude. And that was a big part of this station for many years, a long time ago. And so I, in the last few years, brought it back and redefined it slightly. We now use it as sort of the brand name and theme song for a community effort where on a monthly basis, we spend lots of airtime, thanks to some ad partners and the commitment of the staff here at the station, in telling the stories, which is what we do best, of people and individuals and organizations that are just simply making Detroit and Southeast Michigan a better place to live. And the qualification for how you're chosen is there isn't one. It can be small, it can be big, it can be individuals, it can be groups. We just want to use the power of our platforms, television, website, streaming channel, social media, to tell the story of these groups that are doing incredible work and may not otherwise get the notoriety. And the thought process was when we launched this a year ago, we're in our 13th month right now, so it's literally a year old. We're celebrating our first birthday of this project. We've changed the trajectory of the impact of these organizations, some of them forever, by just taking the power of what we do and who we are and telling their story. That's really been my mantra since I've been back, is make us an integral part of the fabric of our community. And the success of the station, will be, we can realize that success currently, we can realize it tomorrow, and hopefully we can realize it 5, 10, 15 years from today with that strategy.
Yeah, it's really interesting, that community focus, Bob. But I want to pick up on something that you said there, because you talked about the different ways that you do these kind of campaigns, where you talked about it as being something that's on air, but you also talked about digital, you talked about streaming platforms, you talked about social platforms. What emphasis is put on at the local level for you to deliver across all of those platforms? Because that's one of the big challenges the news organizations have these days, is it's not just about broadcast.
Yeah, so great question. And the answer is a significant focus. You mentioned, when we last talked pre-COVID or coming out of COVID to today, clearly the consumption, behaviors of consumers radically changed during COVID, and the discovery phase of streaming at an enormous level, clearly is well documented. And I think what we want to make sure that we do is we have a huge focus on streaming, on our news product and our local news on streaming. We have a huge focus on our website. We have a huge focus on our social channels. What we're trying to do is create a brand of news in Detroit that when an individual is interested in finding out information about something, whether because they heard something in a conversation with a friend and they want to quickly Google search it, whether they're scrolling on their Instagram feed or Facebook feed or TikTok feed, whether they're sitting down in the evening and they want to get caught up and they happen to watch our live linear broadcast, or if they want a more in-depth discussion on a particular topic, we emphasize and utilize all four of these platforms to create for us a brand that when these individuals, no matter which one of those buckets you fall in, you want to get it from us. And so, we have 3 daily streaming only broadcasts we have done over the course of the past years. We do a tremendous amount of event streaming where we have partnerships with organizations that, we have a great partnership with an organization called the Michigan Chronicle, which is a African-American focused newspaper in Detroit, who does a wonderful series each year called Pancakes and Politics. And they bring in community leaders. The CEO of General Motors, Mary Barrow, was on it, was a guest of this. And we stream those conversations. And often news is made within them. And so we use that as a way to write an article, highlight or tell that story on our linear broadcast as well. So we're really focused on meeting people where they want to be met and providing the kinds of content that, at least as you and I speak here this morning, is what people want. Look, we know that could change tonight or tomorrow or next week or next month. Clearly, it likely will. But we're really focused on trying to utilize each one of these platforms for what their strengths are, and then meeting people where they are. We did there was a trial in Michigan. There was a school shooting in one of our community, a high school shooting in Oxford, Michigan. Terrible, tragic story. Unfortunately, that has happened in many communities. But the law enforcement individuals in Detroit charged the mom and dad as part of the prosecution of those involved in this unfortunately terrible situation. And so when those parents were on trial, we streamed that trial live on our streaming channel. Obviously, we were doing stories on our television newscasts. We were writing articles for our websites, but we also did a whole summation of the day's events each evening, both on streaming and on our social platforms. And the engagement in that was incredible. So I think we're in an experimentation phase, but we know for sure that doing these things is growing each one of these platforms in a major way. Like, our streaming growth has been incredible. Our website engagement, incredible. Our social engagement, incredible. Because again, we know that's where people are. And so it's been really gratifying for our staff. I think they realize that, if you're a reporter and you go out and do an interview today and you talk to someone for 10 minutes on the live linear broadcast, 45 seconds, 30 seconds, heck, sometimes 12 or 15 seconds is all that makes air. But to some portion of the population and news consumer, that entire 10 minutes is interesting. Well, there's a place for that. And I think the intentional sort of use of this material and serving these audiences as they want to be served in these different places has proven to be, a really great strategy for us.
And do you see the challenges that you're facing there replicated across the US? This is something that all local stations are having to deal with.
Yeah, I think the fragmentation of news, the availability of news, local news, is unfortunately very pervasive. And I say unfortunately because, it's a lot of people get their news in a lot of different ways. Whether or not it's factual and accurate is a different discussion, and one we could spend another hour talking about, believe me. We have people in Detroit who are literally portraying themselves as news, outlets, and are taking the information, reading it virtually verbatim off our website. And that's fine, at least it's accurate. But I think that the answer is it's really important, for us to do these things because the choices that people have to get information today are virtually limitless. And the accuracy and the truth behind it is so critical. And we're not perfect, at WDIV in Detroit by any means, but I can tell you that the process we go through in our news department to ensure accuracy is is significant, and it's well documented, and it's a part of the fabric of how we operate. And so when you read something on our website or you see something on our station, we've gone to great lengths to make sure that that information is true. And that's just not the case in so many other places. And people believe it, because either it fits their own personal agendas or they not aren't quite sure what to think, and it's the way that it's being delivered to them is convincing. It's there's a myriad. I can't could never claim to understand how someone, an individual processes information, but I think that this approach and the idea that we need to be in these places is something our industry needs to really be intentional about and think about, because if we're not here, if local television newsrooms in Detroit or Houston or any other city in America don't exist, who's going to do the things that are important in making certain that there's a check and balance that exists? If we don't do it, who's going to? And that's something that worries me, that I think about, and I just extol the virtue of what we do every opportunity I can, because what we do is important and it matters. And we hear that every day from our viewers and our readers and our streaming watchers. It's those individuals that don't think what we do has any value that of course I'm biased, of course, as you would expect, but I think that there's a place and a role that we play that's critically important today and will be in a year and 5 years and 10 years from now.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, Bob, my own background's in news, and I think reporting is not glamorous. Reporting is a hard thing to do. It's hard to ensure you get the facts. It's hard to ensure that you're right. And you talk there about the different ways that people can get news. Do you think as well that it's important for organizations like yourself to actually address and to challenge some of that? Like when you have a breaking news scenario, there's lots and lots of information that come into a newsroom, and what you've got to do is check and verify it. Whereas for other people, that's not the case.
I can give you the answer to your question is yes, and I will give you a great example. At Michigan State, there was a campus shooting, and we were in breaking news coverage, as you would expect. We get word in our newsroom that it happens, and we go on the air in prime time, roughly 9 o'clock, reporting whatever information in detail we had. And at a point during the coverage, our anchors are on set and they're delivering information, and we have a reporter on campus walking around trying to get information. And at one point during the coverage, our anchor sort of, I would describe it as stopped. And he said, I just need to reset things here for a second. And he picked up his telephone that was on the anchor desk, and he held it up and he pointed to it and he said, I just want to address all of the things that many of you at home are reading and seeing on social media tonight about this shooting on the campus of Michigan State. He said, my phone since I've been sitting on this anchor desk, has been blowing up with text messages from people asking, why aren't, this occurred, why aren't you reporting it, and things of that nature. And he looked at the camera and he said, we're not reporting what you're reading because it isn't true. And I think that's really important. That articulates, I think, what you said about the need for us to challenge information and the need for us to, the other way that we do it is we're transparent in our news gathering. I work really hard with our staff. Show the process. Demonstrate to the viewer through the way you tell your story the steps you took today to obtain the information and craft the story you're telling. I think the more transparent we are in our storytelling, the more trust and the more and the bigger difference we can show in the way that we go about doing things versus one of these other individuals that you spoke of.
I want to ask a couple of questions around the sort of COVID time again, Bob, to reflect on that. Because when we last spoke, one of the focuses there was about, helping people deal with the challenges at the time. We talked about remote working and people not being in the
Yeah,
office. And we talked about some of the kind of mental pressures that were put on people that I think we've seen play out, not just in journalism, but across society as things have
yeah.
changed. So now, I mean, what is the newsroom like? Has it returned to a pre-COVID state? Do you still see people who are predominantly out of the office most
Mhm.
of the time? How's it changed if you reflect back on where we were 4 years ago?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we're not back to the way we were before COVID. We're in a different state. And I think the state we're in is a really good state. And what I mean by that is this. We have, and I'm sure other organizations would agree with this, we learned a lot about, we had beliefs of how a newsroom should operate, for example, and the necessity for certain things to occur. And we thought those were some of the tenets of, without them, how could we get our jobs done? And I think remote work and disparate workforces and all of the things that occurred in that time demonstrated that there is some value in thinking at things differently. And so we're in a state now that I would describe as hybrid. We believe that most of our employees are what you would describe as back in the building, but we want people to take advantage of the flexibility that the things we learned in COVID taught us. And so, we don't always have every reporter in our morning editorial meetings. Some of them are already in the field doing their things and are able to join, remotely, much like you and I are talking today. And that allows content to be, published on our websites earlier in the day, which is a good thing. It allows us to be more efficient in the ability to gather news. If someone lives in a suburb of Detroit and the story that they happen to be covering is near to where they live, our station, our facility, our building is located downtown. The time to drive downtown, the time to return, instead of spending that in a commute, our reporters and photographers are able to spend that on gathering news and obtaining information. And so I think there's a lot of things we learned about just how to get things done that we're still taking advantage of today. Look, I still think the 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 lessons you learn and the things you learn about your craft by being in a room with professionals and overhearing discussions and being brought into an impromptu conversation that isn't planned, that is of great benefit, and you learn a tremendous amount about the sensibilities or things that are important to a specific organization, or if you're new into an organ or a younger employee. I think back to all the things I learned as a young person in a newsroom by just being in the newsroom and listening to a very seasoned, experienced reporter speak to a very seasoned, experienced news manager that I would have never learned if I were working remote and not part of a scheduled discussion like that. And so I think making sure that we still create an environment for that sort of learning and experience to happen is really important today. But I also think taking advantage of the things that COVID taught us about flexibility and the way to gather news and do things slightly differently, makes us better today than we were pre-COVID. I really believe that. And then the flip side of that is the way that people consume, right? And so that's taught us a tremendous amount about, like I said, we go out every day and we do a lot of work, do a lot of reporting. Well, where does that reporting end up? I think pre-COVID, only a fraction of that reporting ended up on a linear broadcast. Today, the totality of that reporting can manifest itself on these different platforms, thereby, again, serving those consumers, our news, seekers, in the ways they want to be served without doing extra work necessarily, just utilizing the great work that people were doing every day pre-COVID. Now that work is being seen in different ways on these platforms. And so I think that's been a benefit, to the person interested in local news in the city of Detroit, if you're a fan of our organization.
we've talked a lot about, kind of people, and talked about one of the other elements, of course, of news is about technology.
Yeah,
And something that's crept up in the last couple of years, of course, is AI. So I'm
yeah.
interested in at a local level, you're looking at taking advantage of things like AI and other technologies that can perhaps assist the news gathering operation and the way that you tell stories.
Absolutely. I think we and all organizations should be looking at AI and how it can enhance what we do. Now, very, very, I say that with I would guess some stipulations. I think that what we're looking at doing is using AI to help us with tasks that are time consuming and inefficient. And so the logging of tapes. You come back from an interview and you talk to someone for 20 minutes. If AI can create a transcript of that conversation, that is incredible efficiency. That doesn't change the fact that a reporter or a producer or someone is still watching, listening, choosing, which parts of that interview are being utilized on linear, which parts of that interview, or perhaps the entire interview is being put on a streaming channel. So I think we want to use AI to help us become more efficient. That said, in our organization, a journalist touches anything and everything that gets published on any platform. We are not doing anything that would allow AI to, I'll use the word, publish news. We don't believe that that is in anyone's best interest. We want to be certain that the accuracy, the the context by which a story is being put together, that the words and phrases and things that are being used are correct, and so we want to use AI again to help our staff be more efficient, but I don't see a time in this organization anyway where we would ever have AI publish things. We just the process of a journalist is too critical today. And again, I go back to the misinformation we just spoke about. We will not take that chance. And so I think it's important that technologically, there's things that I hope over the course of time companies, like Avid and others are thinking about to try to help use AI to create products that service news organizations like ours that want to be platform, agnostic in some ways, want to take advantage of all of these things. And so, I'm hopeful from a technological standpoint that as time progresses, that the companies that help support news organizations, are doing things to make this easier and better and allow us to do things in a manner that maintains accuracy and transparency, but also makes us more efficient.
Yeah, I mean, certainly from an Avid perspective, we have Avid Ada, which is very much based around that co-pilot concept where
Yeah,
you have the human in the loop, and the journalist or the editor is still the one making the ultimate decision, but
yeah.
there are tools in place that help. So, Bob, what's the future for the station? You've talked really well about the last number of years, and you've been back in Detroit, and I think the thing that always comes across when we've spoken is the passion you have for local news, which I love, because I think local news is like so kind of fundamental and important. But as you look ahead to the next 6 months or a year, what do you think the future is for the station where you are today?
Well, I'm very optimistic, and I am still very passionate about what I do. I think that again, people want to know what's happening in their community. They want information to keep their friends and family safe. They want to know what decisions being made in local governments are, how they're going to affect how their trash is going to get picked up and how their taxes are going to be impacted. And they also want to celebrate when the Detroit Lions are good. Like there's things that we do that are as important today as they've ever been. And I'm super optimistic because I think that these, as I've mentioned extensively here this morning, I think these other platforms allow us incredible opportunity. I think that the ability to serve these different, consumers of information in the ways that we're able to do today is bigger and better than it's ever been in my career. And so I think the role we play is still critically important. I'm very optimistic that people when they get to a certain part in life become a little less courageous and a little more in tune to the things that they need to, worry about. And I still think that that's a role that we play exceptionally well in a changing, quick moving, landscape. Now, the monetization piece of that is critically important as well, right? That's a different discussion and an important one. But I actually think that, we have advertisers who partner with many different vendors, if you will, including a local television station. They'll come to us and they'll advertise their product or service on television. They look at us as a television station. And they'll go to a different company and they'll utilize a different company to do digital advertising. And they'll utilize sometimes still yet a third company to do social media advertising. And I think what makes me optimistic on the monetization side is those partners that we've had the privilege to work with, where we can make certain that their marketing spend and their messages are aligned because we're able to work with them on all of these different platforms, which we have the ability and all local television has the ability to do. Those are the clients and those are the businesses that are really thriving. Because when you're meeting with 3 or 4 different vendors to do what you want them to do, there's no telling if what you're doing is working in concert. But when you work with a skilled group of individuals like we are, we can ensure that those things do work in concert so that 1 + 1 in your marketing dollars equals 3, not 2. And so I'm very optimistic about that piece of the puzzle as well. And so I think that, I'm in some ways, I think we might be entering the golden age of what we do. It's yes, are there many more choices than there were when, Walter Cronkite was the broadcast of the nightly news? Of course. But I still think that the role that we play is unique to us. Nobody does live better than local television. And so when a hurricane is bearing down on a community in Florida, or a tornado's coming, across the southeast Michigan, or God forbid, these terrible tragedies we've had on college and high school campuses occur, no one does what we do better. And those moments are still critically important and always will be. And so if we can do the things we're doing, find some cool, innovative projects on the side, which we're always trying to do, at least here at WDIV, and be that organization that serves the needs when the needs arise, and then gets embedded in the community like I described at the beginning of this conversation with projects like Go For It, and another one we're launching here this year to celebrate and elevate and try to solve the gap between the incredible number of trades, men and women positions that are needed as we grow as a city and a country, and just the sheer lack of people going into the trades. That's a problem we've identified here that we're trying to solve this year. Those things make me incredibly optimistic and make me believe that the near term and long term health and sustainability and frankly, pivotal role that we play isn't going anywhere. And so I'm as excited today as I was when I started, and Graham Media Group, as I just mentioned a bit ago, 30 years ago. And so, I'd love, that story needs to be told more, right? We need to, the biggest issue we face in some ways is, we haven't maybe done a great enough job articulating the things that you've allowed me to say today, which I really, truly appreciate. Local television stations across the United States play a pivotal role for all the reasons I mentioned. And I think that supporting those organizations is as important today as they've ever been. And so I'm really optimistic.
30 years is a great shift, Bob, and fingers crossed you've got a lot more to come. You're looking very well on it for 30 years working in a news organization. So, Bob, you were one of the first people that I asked this question, and 4 years on in the podcast, I'm still asking people the same question, which is, what is it, if anything, that keeps you up at night?
Oh gosh, that's a really great question. I think I probably answered it similarly 4 years ago. I don't remember my answer, but I feel a sense of responsibility to the employees who work here, to the community, to um, individuals that count on us for critical information, life-saving information. What keeps me up at night is, how do we tell our story so that we have this great sustainable business that I just articulated, so that the constituents that I just mentioned, can be served. And I feel a sense of responsibility today, maybe even more so than I did 4 years ago. I think that um, I want to make certain that the people who go into our industry and work here at this station are fulfilled in their careers, and they feel like they're doing good work that's important, that it matters. And that's hard when you listen to what, some of the rhetoric can be said about what we do, in different places around, the communities that we serve. And so I think what keeps me up at night is that sense of responsibility to be a good partner to our the folks we work with in Detroit on a number of projects, to be there for people in Detroit and Southeast Michigan when it's critical information that needs to be shared, and to create this environment for our staff and our employees where they feel fulfilled and excited to come to work every day and do the work and do the things that matter, I believe, so much, today. And so that's a thought that oftentimes when I am wrestling around at 2 o'clock in the morning, that's kind of going through my mind for sure.
Bob's belief and optimism about local news and the critical role it plays in the local community is one which I think is shared by so many who work in the field, so it was great to catch up with him once again and to get his take. So check out the show notes where you can get links to a blog about the future of news and the latest information about Avid Ada, Avid's AI framework to assist creative users. And you can also get a link to Bob's earlier episode. Make sure to follow Avid across all our various social channels for all the latest news and updates. And that's all for now. Thanks again to Bob and to our production team of Matt, Owen and Wim, and of course to you for listening. Join us next time for more chat with the people making the media.